Well, we've entered the sprint to November, and the angle is back to translate Joe Biden's words for you. Now, on foreign policy, Biden has tried mightily to muddy the waters on his real views and actual record of supporting wars of preemption.
You say that your vote on the Iraq War was based on the President Bush's representations that this wasn't about going to war. It was about presenting a clear, at least, threat to Saddam Hussein. Bernie Sanders says, I saw right through that. Can we say that Senator Sanders' judgment about that was better than yours?
Look, the reason I voted the way I did was to try to prevent a war from happening.
Oh, my God, it's just completely false. And anyone who has any momentary memory of what was happening at the time in 2002 and 2003 knows that. But this is why Biden has sought to capitalize on the now debunked Atlantic magazine's smear against the president, despite the fact that the most incendiary claims in that piece have been disavowed by at least 21 current or former administration sources on the record, by the way.
No president has ever talked about our servicemen and women in that way. And I'm sorry if I'm cutting close to losing my temper, but the simple truth is, if that's how you talk about our veterans, you have no business being president of the United States of America, period.
No. Well, the Biden campaign, of course, is eager to drive a wedge between President Trump and his most loyal constituencies. And he happily took the assist from Atlantic writer Jeffrey Goldberg, who used anonymous sources to conjure up the bogus claim that Trump canceled his visit to an American military cemetery in France 2 years ago because he didn't believe in honoring fallen heroes. Well, Goldberg went on to claim in a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to the more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Bella Wood as suckers for getting killed. Well, this isn't the first time Goldberg cited anonymous sources to prop up a ridiculous claim, or the first time his writing fits seamlessly with the pro-war party's agenda. Now, back in February of 2003, while writing for The New Yorker, Goldberg was busy selling the Iraq WMD claim and the idea that Saddam Hussein had in some way aided and abetted al-Qaeda. He was one of the most influential journalists in the United States whose reporting led to a broad public acceptance for invading Iraq. Here is an interview with Robert Siegel he did of NPR.
In all of your reporting on al-Qaeda and Iraq, what's the strongest piece of evidence you've seen of all that would suggest there really is a link between the two?
I would have to say it's something that I learned of just recently and have in this new story, which is that in the mid-'90s, a series of emissaries went from Afghanistan and earlier from Sudan to Baghdad in order to convince the Iraqi intelligence service to provide al-Qaeda with chemical weapons training in Afghanistan. According to my sources, those emissaries succeeded, and Iraqis did, in fact, help al-Qaeda in the teaching of the use of poison gas.
While many of us, including this host, took that reporting as gospel. Big mistake. Well, at least I did a real mea culpa and changed my thinking completely about these types of preemptive wars, specifically those in the Middle East, and ended up believing that they would make us weaker across the board, as they did. But Mr. Goldberg did not. Although years later he delivered kind of a semi-apology for his role in peddling this pro-invasion narrative, he nevertheless insisted on the dignity of the story, that original story. Now, the dignity of a story that ended up supporting a war that cost trillions of dollars and the lives of over 4,400 Americans? Such is the hubris of an unrepentant liberal interventionist. And this brings us back to Joe Biden. Why did Mr. Goldberg, after his huge Iraq War embarrassment, pull a stunt like this in the campaign's homestretch? To prop up the candidacy of the aging war hawk himself, Joe Biden, that's why. Now, Biden laughably has tried to claim that despite having voted for the war, he was like against it almost soon as it started. Well, in reality, Biden was pushing for military intervention in Iraq 5 years before the invasion. This was a 1998 Foreign Relations Committee hearing.
Many of us believe here, as long as Saddam's at the helm, there is no reasonable prospect you or any other inspector is ever going to be able to guarantee that we have rooted out, root and branch, the entirety of Saddam's program relative to weapons of mass destruction. The only way we're going to get rid of Saddam Hussein is we're going to end up having to start it alone, and it's going to require guys like you in uniform to be back on foot in the desert, taking taking Saddam down.
First of all, he's been in politics a long time, right? But before Biden won the nomination, his record on wars was actually beginning to catch up to him. Salon, which is a left-wing anti-Trump website, was incredulous that the party might actually nominate a war hawk like Biden to go up against Trump, who won in part by taking on the war hawks in his own party. And Biden's explanations weren't washing. What Biden did was to help ensure war happened while trying to wash his hands of responsibility for it. He helped build the car for Bush, filled it up with gas, saw that Bush was drunk, gave him license to do what he wanted. Eventually, Biden pretended he was shocked that the streets were littered with mangled bodies. Now, The Intercept, which is another anti-war, anti-Trump site, has also called out Biden and the Democrats in general for their own long history of supporting wars of preemption. Intoxicated by the maelstrom of crises, both domestic and global, there's been little accounting for these tragedies. The impact of the wars did not even bear mention at the Democratic National Convention, but in the end, a catastrophe of this scale can't just be brushed aside. And Biden claims that Donald Trump has disrespected the troops? A pathetic drive-by smear and a desperate attempt to cover up his own lies about his own history of rubber stamping whatever the pro-interventionist types wanted. Now, the military-industrial complex was never comfortable with Trump, despite the massive increase in spending he pushed back in 2017. Well, the neocons and the foreign policy establishment seized on Goldberg's hit piece. They knew that he asked, well, what? The generals knew he asked uncomfortable questions, like, why are we still in Germany 75 years after World War II ended? And why are people more worried about Russia today than China? And why doesn't NATO nations, why don't they contribute more for their own military defense again? Well, a lot of these war hawks don't like answering those questions or having him asked at all. And they know that Biden will not ask them, won't demand answers to any of those questions. And that's why they like him. Simply stated, Biden's a lifetime member of the pro-war, pro-surveillance state crowd. And the far left, epitomized by the squad, well, they don't like any of this, believe me, they don't like it. But it seems they've made an implicit devil's bargain, that they'll control social policy to push reparations and court appointments in a Biden administration, and then they'll look the other way, at least for now, when it comes to foreign policy. But the rest of us don't have to make that bargain. You know why? Because we actually have a candidate who fights what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, a man who seeks to bring our troops home from endless, unnecessary wars, and who recognizes that we can't solve all of our problems by bombing them. If you want to rein in the Pentagon, President Trump is the only credible option. A vote for Biden will lead us back to the disastrous policies that led to the invasion of Iraq in the first place. And that's the angle.